Hi, Tom Kubinick, Secureit Tactical. Today I'm going to take you through the assembly of our Model 52 weapon cabinet. The only tool required is a 5/16 socket. All right, this is how it arrives. I'm going to get the lid off. Now unpack the cabinet carefully. These are the side panels. I'm just going to set these aside. Next I've got the door. You want to be careful getting this out. This does have some weight to it. Now, we recommend 2 people to assemble a Model 52. It makes the job a lot easier. I'm going to do it solo just to show you what my process is to do it. It is a little tricky to do it by yourself, but it can be done. But we recommend if you've got 2 people, it makes the job really simple. I've got it upside down. For right now, I'm just going to take this and set it to the side until I'm ready for it. Now this is all packaged, designed so everything goes in and is protected when it's shipping. Here's my saddles. This is the hardware, believe it or not, that's it. Just 8 little bolts and this thing is as rigid as a welded cabinet. My saddles. All right, this is the bottom and top. Now the top and bottom are identical and interchangeable, but I do want to show you. On the top and bottom, you've got a front and back. All these sides are the same except this side. It's got a little lip on it that's bent forward. That piece has the exact same. But I want you to be aware that is the front of the cabinet and that's where the door will go. And now I get to the last piece, which is the back of the cabinet and the rails. All right, now the lock rails are zip tied in. I've got a little cutter. And get a knife or get a cutter. Don't try to bend and rip these things out. I don't want you to bend anything on the cabinet. These are the lock rails that draw the sides in together. And here is the last piece. This is the back of the cabinet with the cradle grid system on it. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to set a base down. I'll build this. I guess I'll do it this way. And here's the back of the cabinet. Now when you're assembling this, louvers go up. I've got the threaded rods. These are welded into the bottom and there's a hole in the cabinet. And what you're going to do is carefully set this in place. All right, just to explain, I've got threaded rods front and back and on the sides. The rod here and the rod in the back go into the holes on the back and the front of the cabinet, and these side units are what the joiner bars bolt to. I'm going to take one of the side rails. Now if you're going to look where that screw is, these go right down in between the screws and the rails line up. All right, just to give you an idea, I want to explain what's happening. The panels have ears on them. The joiner bar has a triangular cut in it, so when they slide over the panel and bolts down, it grabs the 2 sides and pinches them together and holds them together. Ears on the top are facing the opposite way, so on the top of the cabinet, it's the same components and they just go the other way. So these joiner bars, there's 8 of them in the kit. They're all identical. 4 get used this way, 4 get used this way, but it's all the same piece. I've got the back in, that bolt's going through the center hole. I'm holding this in place just with my hand on top. I take the joiner bar with the little holes and bend on the bottom, place it over the rail, and let it just slide down. The little ears go into this rail. It goes over the bolt. And now I just put on a nut and do it finger tight. I'll come back and tighten these down. And as you tighten these down, it draws the whole system together, makes it incredibly strong. Now, I'm going to do the same thing with this side. So now I'm putting the panel in place. I'm going to take a joiner bar, just kind of let it over. I just kind of wiggle it and slide it, and then down on the bolt once everything lines up. Finger tight. Boom. I'll tighten this up a little bit. The front is a challenge when you're doing it solo. You can do it by yourself. It's a lot easier with 2 people. Now to do the door, I'm going to open up the battery compartment, and now I've got a battery. Make sure the battery's in place. the factory default 6 ones. And now the door's open. You need to have the door open to complete this. This is the little threaded rod around. As you can see in the back, it goes through a hole. Here's the door that's open. I've got the same little hole. So I've got to set the door in place on top of this screw. I'm going to pick up the cabinet. Now I'm not grabbing on the sides because I need the cabinet to sit flush. So I'm just going to pick it up and carefully set it in place. And you just kind of wiggle it back and forth. It takes a little time sometimes, and it drops in. So I'm going to open the door, and you'll see that it is set on the pin. I've got to get the bolts and the lock rods on, but this becomes awkward because of the weight of the door. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use one of the saddles to hold the weight of the door. If you're on a slippery floor, it might kick out. This is where a helper really would make it easier. All right, so I've got lock rod. I'm going to put this in place, drop that down, just kind of press everything together. My bolts, I left them in the bottom, so they'd be right there when I needed them. Again, finger tight. Now I'm going to grab the other lock rod. All right, so this is the last one for the bottom. Now the pieces aren't really lined up, but when you take the joiner bar, I put it on, just kind of push into it a little bit. I got my hand on the other side and I wiggle it in until that hole lines up with the bolt. I just put the nut on finger tight. You got the bottom of the cabinet is assembled. So I'm going to close the door. So I got the bottom finger tight. I'm going to take the top. Now, make sure that lip is in the front. I'm going to set this over the top. And those holes have to line up, and it's just kind of you just kind of wiggle it, and boom, they're in. So now you got to put the top joiner bars on, tighten everything up, and draws everything in, and makes this one heck of a strong cabinet. Now all you got to do is put the lock rods or the lock rails on the top. It's the same as the bottom. I just place them over the rail. There's a bolt up here. You can't really see it, but it's identical to the bottom. Same with the back one. Same thing, slide that over. As each rail goes on and the cabinet squares up, they get easier and easier to put on. Then I'll do the two on the other side. And now at this point, this cabinet has gotten so square and is getting so rigid that they go right into place. Now they've got holes in the bottom. I'm going to put a bolt here. The bolt in the center of the back and the center of the front are not required for structural integrity of the cabinet. We've looked at just doing pins. They're really mainly for alignment of the back and top when you're assembling. But I'm going to go ahead and put the bolts on just to keep it as rigid as possible. All right, now I've got my socket. Now this is just finger tight, but still has a little bit of yaw to it. As I tighten this up though, and when you're tightening these, you don't need to torque them down, just snug them up and you'll feel it. And as those bolts draw the bars together, it just locks the whole system. The load, the stress on the cabinet is not on the nuts and bolts. It all gets transferred to the lock rods. It's all 14 gauge steel. Now, you could use a power driver. I recommend doing this by hand. It doesn't take that long, and if you over torque these bolts, you could break them. All right, now what I do is I go one last time around just to verify everything is snugged, and that's just on the main lock bars. Now that's the full cabinet assembly. What you've got now, I mean, this is an incredibly rigid cabinet. This is as strong as a welded cabinet. All right, I'm gonna put the base units in. They've got a little male-female plug together. Set those in place. And you set them so the steps come up towards you. And they just set in the bottom. All right, now I'm just installing the saddles. Now the cradles I just put in at the midpoint right now. I'll adjust these as I put rifles into the cabinet. Now all of our saddles come with a screw. It goes into the back of the unit here, and then a bungee, which goes over the cleats. The purpose of the bungees and that screw is to lock the saddles down and allow you to lock the firearms down. It's primarily meant for mobile applications. We've included the bungees though because our customers just find so many uses for them. Here's a Ruger Scout. I got my sling on it. Now, what I do with the bungee is I take the sling, bring it up to the barrel. I'm going to place the rifle in the cabinet. I'm going to adjust the saddle up. I'm going to take the bungee, pull it over. So I'll bring that back one. What that does is keeps the sling in tight with the rifle so the sling will not tangle with any other of your firearms or gear when you're removing rifles from the cabinet. Here's our AR-10, and that's actually pretty good. Shotgun, bring that up one. And positioning of the saddles on AR type rifles, I tend to grab the rails. If it's something with a precision floating barrel, I'll grab the stock on it. For the rest of them, I just position it kind of where it makes sense. All right, so just quick wrap up. Carefully unpackage all your parts. Start with your bottom. Make sure you've got the front facing you. Back goes on first. Sides with the lock rails. Make sure you've got your screws sitting in the bottom of the cabinet. You're going to need those handy when you're putting the lock rails on. Everything gets finger tight, and then come through the socket, tighten it up. You don't need to over torque it, just snug it up until it just starts to bottom out. And that is the Secureit Model 52 ultralight gun safe assembly.